Are you responsible for the hiring and firing decisions in the IRS?
I oversee the human capital function within the IRS.
You oversee.
Yes, sir.
I've learned all kinds. I'm from the private.
Well, sir,
I'm from the private sector. I've learned all kinds of new terms here. You oversee it. So are you
Yes, sir.
responsible for it, or not?
I am responsible for the human capital aspect. Yes, sir.
The human capital aspect. I was reading your bio here. It said before joining the USDA, you worked in the private sector with multiple high-growth organizations.
Yes, sir.
Question I have for you, one of the many, is in the private sector, would they rehire people the way the IRS does? People that may have been under investigation, people that may have been under investigation for tax fraud, people that whose personnel file said do not hire. How would the private sector, your experience been? How would they handle that?
They go through
Any difference?
Yes, sir, there's a difference. They go through a process. I don't think, in my experience, and again, this is my experience, there's less rules and boundaries that you have to operate in within that. So,
in the private sector? Or
yes, sir. In the private sector, there's less boundaries that box you into certain scenarios. So it's a streamlined process.
So we have more boundaries, more rules, more regulations in the public sector, safe to say, in hiring and firing, and we get worse results.
I would say.
Not saying the employees are bad, but we're rehiring up to 10% of people that have been terminated from the agency prior? Is that true? Is that true? Mr. Kurtz, is that true?
It's 10% of the former IRS employees that were brought back. That's correct.
And were they terminated with cause, or did that 10%, did they leave on their own accord?
Well, they either were terminated or they were going to be terminated and left before it.
And I'm from the private sector, can't believe this. We would hire back 10% of people we were going to terminate. Does that strike you as incredible, Mr. Kurtz?
Yeah, and they didn't have to do it, okay? And our issue was the selecting official is the person we think should get the information to make the decision. Alexander prevents that from happening. There are suitability issues at the end, but I don't think that's our big issue. Our issue is earlier in the process, we believe a selecting official should have the information to make a decision. That's where the bad decisions are being made. In fact, there's not a decision. You're sitting there with candidates as a selecting official, and you don't know the derogatory information that you just described in making your choice.
Does that make sense to you that they don't know that?
Well, no. That's why we made the recommendation that they change the process.
Mr. George Tigta issued a report this past July, correct, on the problem of IRS rehiring employees previously fired by the agency. This isn't the first time a report like that's been issued. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That report documented that you issued an instance when the IRS rehired somebody who literally on their personnel file it said, do not hire this person. Can that possibly be correct?
That is correct.
I mean, it sounds like not a good situation to me. Doesn't sound like something, private sector is not perfect. Doesn't sound like something that would happen in the private sector. Did the IRS adopt your recommendations, Mr. George, on this topic?
They have in principle in the most recent report. Again, we issued a previous report in 2014 on the very same issue. They said they were going to adopt.
They did I'm sorry, they did in principle? Is that what you said?
In the current one, they're in process.
They're in the process of adopting them.
Correct.
And how's that process going? Is there a sense of urgency there?
Yes, sir. We will have that.
As evidenced by what?
As evidence as we're going to have it implemented and running in October when we start our filing season hiring to bring back the part-time, as you called them, but we call them seasonal employees. So we took all the TIGNA recommendations that came through, and we're implementing them right now. We'll have them done. We're on target to have them done in October.
You know, I represent the eastern part of Iowa. It's kind of a blue-collar district. I go out there and talk to the factory workers, and I tell them, you know, if you were terminated by this company or going to be terminated, do you think you'd ever get rehired again at the same company? I mean, that would be a laugh line. Can you see why people out in the real part of this country think what's going on here is nonsensical? Why there needs to be change? Why we need to drain the swamp? These are the things that I don't even want to repeat because it's embarrassing. Do you understand that? I mean, do you hear that?
Yes, I understand what this looks like, and we are doing everything possible right now to put those things, to put the recommendations from TIGDA, plus some additional things, like I said, about seeking debarment authority from OPM to be able to put more controls in place to stop this from happening.
But you said previously more controls and more regulations. I think you said pens you in, and now you want to put more regulations in place.
No, sir, these are not controls that come from OPM. I'm referring to internal controls, management controls that we administer at the IRS to be able to stop this type of activity based on the recommendations from TIGTA from happening. These are recommendations that TIGTA came forward with that we are adopting and implementing. And I'm stating that we will have that in place in October to be able to monitor, to provide what Mr. Coons talked about, which is giving the hiring manager the suitability and the issues with prior.
This will be in place next month?
This will be in place at the end of October. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can we follow up to make sure this is in place by the end of October? Because these are the very reasons why there's so little confidence in the federal government out there in the real world. So I would say time is of the essence, and I look forward to you doing that.
Yes, sir.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman, the time I do not have.
Yeah, I thank the gentleman for his good question. The gentlelady